Apostrophe CMS onboarding series, Widgets. Part 1, creating a layout widget. In our tutorial for creating pages in our Apostrophe project, we made use of the core widgets for adding content to our homepage areas. In this next set of tutorial videos, we will shift focus towards custom widget development, aiming to furnish our editors with unique tools for creating our site content. We will create a basic layout widget, a pivotal step towards accomplishing our final project's appearance. This will introduce template helper functions, schema field conditionals, and introduce how we register icons for use in our project. Next, in the second video, we will formulate a deal widget, designed to empower editors with the capability of presenting links garnished with images and headings in multiple formats. This will introduce some additional options and methods for working with images in schemas and templates. Finally, in the third video, we will create a rating widget that allows the editors to add ratings to different products using a star system. In the creation of this widget, we will also begin to learn about async components, a powerful way to add dynamic content to pages asynchronously, giving your widgets access to site settings and data supplied by APIs. Plus, we will revisit adding the module styling. Again, you can follow along with the tutorial to modify your own project, or to see the progress of the project while following this tutorial, switch to the Sec 2-4-Widgets branch of the Apostrophe onboarding repo in the link below. Creating a new widget is much like creating a new page. A widget module extends the core @Apostrophe CMS widget type module and requires two files, an index.js file and a views widget.html file. The index file contains the content schema fields for collecting content from the user, as well as helper methods that can extend or alter that content. The widget.html file provides a template for generating the markup to display the content. This is like the page module index.js file and the views page.html file. While widgets and pages have some similarities, there are some key differences. As with pages, the content schema fields of the widgets are added through the fields property. Unlike page modules, where the fields property takes both add and group properties, widgets take only the add property. Fields are not currently grouped by tabs and are added into the modal according to their order in the add object. Another key difference occurs behind the scenes in how Apostrophe handles content added through a page versus a widget. When you save a page, Apostrophe creates a new document in the database. That document and the content within it can be retrieved from the database with a unique ID. This isn't true of widgets. They don't exist as documents within the database outside the page where they're added. However, as we will cover when we create the rating widget in this tutorial, each widget gets a unique ID that we can use to retrieve content. Because widgets aren't meant to be standalone documents, the markup file that you add to the module is different also. Rather than creating markup for a whole page, you only create a block of HTML code that can be slotted into any page. This means that generally you aren't going to have a template that you're extending. Although, if you have a series of interrelated widgets, you can certainly opt to create a template or fragments to be used within each. Our homepage areas are currently limited to adding widgets that span the whole width of the page. Looking at the final layout of our example project, we can see that the content on the homepage is split into columns of different widths. For example, the top area of the homepage is 2 columns, with the left column taking 33% and the right 66%. In the Bootstrap framework, you create rows that are then split up into multiple columns. So we will create a row widget. This row widget can then be added to the homepage areas and will expose new areas corresponding to the number of columns that the user selects. To simplify widget creation, we'll use the CLI tool. The command apos add widget row will create a new module with the name row-widget in our modules folder. Within our new module folder, the CLI tool will also create the basic index.js file extending the core @Apostrophe CMS widget type module. It will also provide a views folder containing a widget.html markup page. For this widget, we don't need any client-side JavaScript, so we won't supply the player flag. We will revisit this in the third widget video. Before this widget will function, we need to add it to the project app.js file. You can add row-widget at the end of the module's property object. Make sure to separate your new module from the previous one with a comma. Opening the module's row widget folder, let's dig into the index.js file. Right now, our options section contains the label for the widget that will be displayed to the user for selection within an area. We're going to add 2 additional options. We are setting both the icon and optional preview icon to the same icon. The icon will be shown in the drop-down menu when people select icons during in-context editing on the page. The preview icon will be displayed in the flyout menu if the area that the row widget is added into has the expanded true option. Remember in our pages creation tutorial, the top area used the in-context dropdown and the bottom area used the flyout. If we didn't add a preview icon option, the value of the icon option would be used instead. The icon being used in this module isn't currently registered by Apostrophe in the global icons.js file. The icon is available within the Apostrophe icon package, which is based on the View Material Design Icons version 4.12.1 package. In order to use this icon within our module, we need to add a new configuration property to our module's index.js file. The icons property takes an object that contains one or more icons being registered. These icons can either be part of the Apostrophe package or custom icons added to our project. The keys within the object are the names that we want to use in our project. The value of each key points at the icon file that should be used. This can either be the name of a file in the Apostrophe project without the file suffix, or a path and full name of the file for custom icons. Please see the documentation for more info about the path that should be supplied. Note that any icon that we bring in needs to be a View component. Icons can typically be converted to View components by copying the wrappers added to each icon in the Apostrophe package. Note that icons is a top-level property, not within the options object. Within the icons object, we are using a property to define the name that we want to use in our project. In this case, we will use view-column-outline. For value, we are adding the component name for the icon that we want to use from the Apostrophe package without the file suffix. Moving on to the field schema of our widget, there are a number of different ways that we could add a row with different numbers of columns. In the end, we want to give the user a choice of 1 to 4 columns per row. We also want to allow them to select variants of 2 columns, where the individual columns take up different widths, like 25% and 75%. Each of the columns requires an area schema field that is populated with widgets for the user to add content. So we need to solve 2 problems. First, we need to display the number of areas that correlates with the value the user selects. Second, we need to add styling to make each column the correct width. To solve the first problem, we're going to use conditionals. These optional configuration fields allow you to determine if a schema field is presented to the user based on 1 or more values. These values can be based on the value of other fields within the same schema or the results returned by an asynchronous function. Conditionals are created by adding the if property to the schema field. That property receives an object that at the simplest contains 1 or more key value properties, where the key is equal to the name of another field in the schema, and the value is the exact or strict equality desired for that field. This can be a string, Boolean, or number, but it must match exactly. If there is more than one property in the object, then all conditions must match in order for the field to be presented. The if property object can also contain a $or property that takes an array of objects. Each of the objects in the array contains a schema field name as a property and the desired match for a value. However, this will evaluate to true if any of the fields evaluates as true. In this example, we're adding a new schema field type called select. This allows the editor to select from a drop-down list populated by the choices array to set the value of the field. We're also adding a schema field named third area that is of the area type that we used in the Creating Pages tutorial. This field has an if property that is taking an object with a $or property and an array of 2 objects. These objects are telling Apostrophe to show this field if another field in the schema, in this case columns, shown above, has a value of either 3 or 4. We could hardcode each of the 4 different areas as shown in this example, but this wouldn't help with setting the desired styling. Instead, we will create the area schema using a loop. We will also move this code out into a separate file. This isn't required, it is simply a choice to keep the code base more organized. Switching over to the code editor, create a modules, row widget, lib, fields.js file and add the following code. I'm going to cut and paste the code in and then walk you through it. First, we are importing the area widget configuration from the project level lib folder. Remember, we used this when we were creating the default page type. As we add our next widgets, we will alter the area.js file to export additional configurations, and we'll return to alter this fields.js file. Next, we're creating the first schema field for our widget. In this case, it is named columns and has a field type of select and some help text that will be presented to the user. Our select is getting a default value of 1 using the optional def property. The choices property receives an array of objects that are each composed of a label that is presented in the dropdown to the user and the corresponding value for that selection. For the equal width columns, we're just passing the number of columns desired. For the columns that require different widths, we are passing a string that has the width of each column. Full width in Bootstrap is 12 columns, 50% width would be 6, 25% would be 3, etc. This is idiosyncratic to Bootstrap and will be different with other frameworks. The calls_if variable gives an array that we can use to determine our conditional depending on the selected value. We are padding it with null at the beginning to make looping easier. Next, we set up a loop to add from 1 to 4 columns. For each iteration, we add an area object to the existing fields variable and give that area a name and a label based on the counter value. We use the imported configuration to add the same set of widgets to each area. Finally, we use the spread operator to add our conditional field based on the values provided by the calls_if array. So array 1 won't have a conditional since the value is false, but array 3 will have a conditional field with an OR that will return true only if the user selects either 3 or 4 in the dropdown. Finally, at the end of this file, we are exporting our newly populated fields variable. So now, how do we use it? Open the modules, row widget, index.js file, and bring in our newly exported fields variable. Then we can modify the add section of our schema fields object to use this import. This will add all of our schema fields for our widget. While we aren't quite finished with the changes that we need to make to our index.js file, let's shift over to creating the templating needed to display our content. In the Creating Pages tutorial, we touched on the basic usage of Nunjucks. Within these templates, plain HTML markup can be intermixed with tags that are interpreted and utilized during rendering. These include conditional tags that selectively display content and others that provide loops to add repetitive items like list items. If you open the widget.html file of the module right now, you will see that a section with an attribute of data row widget has been added. You can elect to place your code inside this section or eliminate it within your project. In this case, I'm going to eliminate this section because it makes the Bootstrap styling more difficult. We're going to start with a simplified, non-working version of our final template and modify it. Add the following code to the modules, row widget, views, widget.html file, replacing all of the content. I'm going to paste it in and then explain the code. This markup starts by adding a div with Bootstrap classes for margin, MB5, and another class called row. The row class tells our styling framework that we want this content to be the full width of the container. Using additional Bootstrap classes, we can split the width into multiple columns. Next, we have a for loop within our control tags. In Nunjucks templates, a for in loop takes an array of values. The array items can be simple numbers, strings, or they can be objects. Each array item is passed individually to the code within the loop and the HTML rendered before progressing to the next array item. In this case, the for loop would iterate over an array supplied by the columns schema field. The value of the schema field and any others is supplied to the template within the data.widget object. Directly looping over the array items might work well if we had only allowed the user to specify the number of columns, although in that case a range tag would work better. But we also allowed them to specify custom widths. Additionally, our column schema doesn't return an array, only a single value. We'll fix this in a moment. Inside the for loop, we are adding a div with a Bootstrap class to specify how much width the column should take. Again, right now, this is just for illustration. We are going to need to modify the value of the user's choice so that it works in both the for loop to add the correct number of columns and for adding our column class. Within our column div, we are once again using the area template helper. We are passing it the widget data object and asking it to process the area named area plus loop.index. This final portion, loop.index, is a special variable that is inside of Nunjucks loops. It provides the current iteration of the loop starting at 1, and we are concatenating that value onto the area string. There are other variables that allow you to easily change markup output for the first item, loop.first, or last item, loop.last, or perform other operations within the loop. As written, this code will not function because of the value being returned by the column schema field. We have two requirements: that the value delivered to the template be an array that will work with the for loop. Secondly, the array contains a value for each column that reflects the width of the column. This will cause the for loop to iterate over the markup the correct number of times and add the correct width classes. To accomplish this, we're going to use a helper configuration function in our index.js file. The helper's customization function takes the module as an argument and returns an object of functions that add template utility methods. We have already utilized one helper, area, to display the content added into our page area schema fields. In this case, we will create a custom helper that will convert the values coming from the columns select field into an array. Open the modules row widget index.js file and add the following code after the fields object. This code declares a new helper function called layout_to_columns that takes the columns value and converts it to an array of values that correspond to the number and width of the columns to be added. This array is then returned. Now we need to add it to our template. Open the modules row widget views widget.html file and add the following at the top of that file. This line calls the new helper function we just added, specifying the module and function name and passing in the value of the column schema field as an argument. We could simplify this call by adding an alias option to our module. For example, adding alias row would shorten this to apos.row.layout_to_columns. The return value of our helper function is assigned to the calls variable using the Nunjucks set control tag. So now we can alter the for loop to use this new array. Now that we have a functional row widget, we need to add it to the areas where we want to utilize it. For our tutorial project, I added it to the homepage top area and bottom area widget lists. To accomplish this, open the modules Apostrophe CMS homepage index.js file and add row to the widgets objects of both areas. At this point, you could spin your project up and try out the new row widget. When editing the admin UI of your project, like adding a new icon, it will occasionally be necessary to delete the apos build and data/temp folders before building. You will also want to make sure that the admin UI is rebuilt by adding the apos dev flag. Remember, to edit a page, you need to be logged in, then just navigate to the page and click the edit button at the upper right. We are going to start to make this look like the project homepage, although much of this will have to wait until we create the rest of our widgets and the review piece. In this tutorial, we covered the creation of a custom widget to give content editors the ability to add rows containing columns of various widths. This widget took advantage of Bootstrap styling classes to accomplish this but you could easily adapt this for Tailwind or your own custom CSS styling. Any similar widget that you implement has to solve two problems. First, creating the correct number of areas with the desired widgets in each. Second, adding styling for the column widths. Either CSS Grid or Flexbox might be great alternatives, and there are a number of areas of the code that could be simplified. But this example had the advantage of introducing you to Nunjucks helpers for formatting template data and taking advantage of helper files for adding fields. In this tutorial, we covered the process of registering new icons to enhance the user interface of our project, incorporating icons into the widget preview menu, and, as we'll explore in future tutorials, the admin bar adds a modern touch to the UI. We also introduced schema field conditionals, a powerful feature we'll revisit in upcoming tutorials. Schema field conditionals enable more tailored and intuitive editor experiences by simplifying content management and navigation within the UI. Next up, we will create another custom widget that will show us how to work with images, both using the core image widget with configuration and how to use images outside of an area using built-in Apostrophe helpers. If you have any questions about this tutorial or want more help starting your Apostrophe CMS project, please join our vibrant community in Discord. You can join right now by following the link in the comments. We hope that you will continue along with our tutorial series and subscribe to the other great videos in our channel.